Hey, Jess, welcome.
We are live.
Great. Thanks, Katie. Good morning, everybody. My name is Maggie Ullman. I'm the chair of our Environment Safety Committee here in the city of Asheville, and I want to welcome everybody to our April 25th, 2023 remote meeting. All of our council committee members and staff are participating virtually, and to help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. And for today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during this meeting. We have public comment at the beginning and the end of the agenda. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 9477. Your phone will be muted. You'll hear the meeting live, and at this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter the speaker queue. So I will kick us off further with a roll call. Council and staff, as I say your name, come off mute and say hello. So welcome to our Vice Mayor, Sandra Kilgore.
Good morning, everyone.
And our Councilwoman, Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
We also have our City Manager, Deborah Campbell.
Good morning.
Our Deputy City Attorney, John Maddox. Welcome, John.
Good morning.
Our Sustainability Director, Bridget Herron, is with us.
Good morning, everyone.
Oh, there you are. Also, I believe our police chief is with us, and if not, our chief, I see maybe Deputy Baumstark. Are you here in his stead?
Yep, I am right here. Morning.
Welcome. Glad you're here. Also, our fire chief. It looks like maybe our deputy chief, Crudup, is here today.
Good morning.
Hello. Also, our sustainability program manager, Kira Boulin, is here.
Good morning.
Welcome. Do we also have our division chief, Jeremy Knighton, on the line somewhere? Yeah, I see his name there.
Good morning.
Hey. And I think we also have our sanitation solid waste manager, Jess Foster. Welcome, Jess.
Thank you.
I might have missed someone. Also, I see our assistant city manager, Ben Woody. Welcome. So that's our starting roll call, and we'll jump into our agenda. The first item, as I mentioned earlier, we start and end this committee with public comment. So, Katie, do we have anyone who wanted to kick us off from the public with comments on our agenda?
Yes, we do. One moment.
Oh, fantastic. Welcome, public commenter.
Caller ending in 7629. Your line is now open.
Hi, Council. I've been sitting in the court for Aston Park case for the past couple of weeks. From the start of these charges, I could see these were political arrests aimed at activists who were trying to meet needs in the community. I spoke at council in May of 22 and talked about how excited I was for when you all would be sued in relation to this, and I'm so thrilled that's happening now with the help of the ACLU. In the proceedings, I've been absolutely astounded at the incompetence of the Asheville Police Department. They put a deeply inexperienced cop, Sam DeGrave, on the case, who came in with his own narrative and tried desperately to build a case around it. They grossly mishandled evidence in this case, supposedly finding 257 pieces of it just last Tuesday, and are trying to handpick evidence that fits a narrative that tries to make activists engaging in things like harm reduction look like a crime. We have to watch them on the stand tell us they don't even know their own standard operating procedures and how they have tremendous amounts of bomb trainings while they are currently risking an explosion in downtown Asheville by storing potentially flammable evidence alongside off-gassing equipment. They simply do not know what they are doing, and it would be hilarious to watch if it didn't have such serious implications. It's no wonder that activists don't like watching cops violently sleep in camp of homeless people when they have nowhere else to go. They've gone on to falsifying charges, arresting journalists, and banning people from parks who are trying to engage in community care for 3 years in a constitutional violation. They continue to target the Black community with disproportionate force, and none of us have forgotten them gassing the town, fracturing a protester's skull, and blinding another, which are being sued for too. They're putting an outlandish amount of resources towards the supposed felony littering case while APD keeps crying wolf about how they don't have enough resources. We have many people who are currently awaiting trial in our state's deadliest jail, and yet we're prioritizing this prosecution, wasting the time of courts, lawyers, jurors, defendants, and even the cops themselves. This is an embarrassment to the city of Asheville, to David Zach, to the entire Asheville Police Department, along with Parks and Rec. In a time where abortion and trans rights are under attack in our state, and we live in the fifth most expensive city in the country to rent, the answer to this is not more policing, and in fact, policing poses an increasing danger to all of us. The lengths they've gone to here show the true colors of APD, which more and more people are seeing as they push these charges and drag this out. It doesn't matter how many pictures of cute dogs Colpro Media tells APD to post on their Facebook page, as more and more of us recognize the true intention of policing has never been and will never be community safety, which is a major priority for myself and my neighbors. There's a small group of cop-connected wealthy people and business owners who are trying to influence you all into police crackdowns that won't work. We must address the root causes of safety issues. We cannot incarcerate our way out of the problems that we face. The one thing I continue to be deeply thankful for is that there are so many people who have decided they don't want to be cops. Thanks to everybody who quit the APD. To those who I'm sure are well on their way, you can choose a profession where you can actually serve people in your community that doesn't need to hire a PR firm to convince people that you need to exist. The police state will repress the voices of those who speak out against the inhumanity shown towards our neighbors and who need the most help among us, but we will not be silent. Thank you.
Katie, do we have any other callers?
Checking right now. No, we do not.
Thanks. Well, that was a lot. Our next item is item 2 on the agenda, to approve the minutes from March 28th.
So move.
Sandra, I'll second.
Great. Roll call vote. Sandra, Vice Mayor Kilgore,
Aye.
Councilwoman Smith,
Aye.
and myself, aye. Motion approves to approve the minutes. Awesome. Item number 3 on the agenda is the food scraps drop-off program, which I personally love and drop my scraps off to often. Kira is going to talk to us about that program. And this is an item that staff is seeking action from us. So excited to hear what's going on.
Great, thank you. Good morning, council members, fellow staff, and folks listening at home. I'm Kira Boulan, the Sustainability Program Manager, and I'm going to share with you an update about the Food Scraps Drop-Off Program this morning. Katie, you can go on to the next slide, please. So key takeaways from this pilot program to date, we know that food waste reduction and organics diversion are key strategies to address the city's waste reduction goal, greenhouse gas emissions reduction identified in our climate emergency resolution. So far, our pilot food scraps drop-off program has indicated there's resident interest and willingness to participate. People are willing to drive their food scraps around, so we're happy about that. We know that interdepartmental participation and city-county collaboration are necessary for successful program management and resident engagement. And finally, that an interlocal agreement with Buncombe County is needed to further operationalize this pilot program. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why food waste reduction is a local priority amongst our many priorities here at the city. So far, we know that 35% of city residential landfill materials are compostable. So that's 35% of all the waste from our city services going into the landfill could be diverted and go to other places. That's 8,000 tons of compostables per year going to the landfill. So that's a lot of organics that are going right into our landfill in Buncombe County. And across sectors, so zooming out a little bit beyond the scope of the food scraps drop-off program, 33,000 tons of food waste are estimated to be generated per year from the city of Asheville here. So that includes restaurants, grocers, retailers, institutions. So there's a lot of opportunity in this sector in general. And we know that diverting organics away from the landfill contributes to our waste reduction goal, reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and all of these and more are called for in our climate emergency declaration. So that positions this program and the work we're doing here as a priority here for the city. Next slide, please, Katie. So I'm going to take us back in time a little bit because we know that this organics focus is not brand new here at the city. We've been doing work in this realm for many years, back probably before 2014. But I know starting in 2014, we started to contract with local partners, supporting residents and doing backyard composting. So through education, bin giveaway, other opportunities to support residents in making that choice at home in their households if they were willing and able to do so. We also, in that time frame, started to partner with an organization or a network of organizations called Food Waste Solutions. We're a foundational partner in that work at the city and supported the Food Waste Solutions Summits in 2017 and 2019. We're really starting to address food waste reduction across the EPA's food waste reduction hierarchy. So thinking about source reduction all the way down to composting at the lower end of the pyramid. Coming out of the 2019 summit, there was an identification for further operationalizing or thinking about programs and projects that we could do across the network to help support residents in better food waste reduction initiatives. Fast forwarding to 2020, the city of Asheville was selected to participate in the Natural Resource Defense Council's Food Matters Southeastern cohort. So participating alongside cities like Atlanta, Memphis, Nashville, and Orlando, we were able to lean into technical expertise and some grant funding from NRDC to identify strategies and put those into action here in the city of Asheville. So leaning on some best practices nationally from some of their foundational partners in Baltimore, Denver, and across the country. We identified a number of strategies, including the food waste drop-off program. We also worked with Food Waste Solutions to develop a proclamation, raise awareness in the community, and continue to do education campaign to support residents in reducing household food waste. The Food Scraps Drop-Off program was launched in 2021, and then in partnership with the county was expanded in 2022. We were able to partner with them on a grant to the NCDEQ to be able to identify some expansion sites beyond our initial pilot sites to bring these food scrap drop-off programs into the community. And the county actually was the holder of that grant. So that was a nice partnership starting in 2022. And moving into 2023, we're looking to operationalize this pilot program. Next slide, please. Here's a little bit of our impact to date. So as I said, we opened in October 2021, expanded to 6 current sites, and the last 2 sites of this initial phase are scheduled to be open in the next couple of weeks. 6 of those sites are here in the city of Asheville, some on city county, some on county property, and 2 sites are located outside of city limits in the county. There's 2,300 households that are registered, about 3,800 individuals. So folks are willing to drive their food scraps around. 65% of those folks were not actively composting. So we're able to kind of point to evidence that this is real diversion that would otherwise be going into our landfill stream. There's been 160 tons diverted to date. With the fully operational 6 city sites, we're projecting about 2,250 tons per year as a projected diversion in that time, which is equivalent to 164 vehicles taken off the road for vehicles driven for 1 year. And we do have Jess Foster on the line, as we mentioned earlier. So following the presentation, if there's more specific questions around some of these diversion numbers, that we can tag team on responses to that. Some of this information that we're looking at in these slides, I'm sorry, Katie, you can go on to the next slide. Some of the information that we're looking at in some of these slides was from the county's 2022 waste diversion study and also NRDC baseline calculator that we collaborated with them to conduct in 2019. So we're learning lessons because this is a pilot program, and we're seeing that our preferred strategy is neighborhood-based, smaller sites. So we initiated at Stevens Lee Recreation Center with a larger site and moved to community rec centers and libraries around the community, trying to bring these opportunities closer to where people live, work, and play. We also know that site maintenance, customer service, and communications and hauler managements are areas that we've continued to improve, and there are opportunities for improved efficiency and collaboration across those areas. And we have leaned real hard into our collaborations, and that's been a recipe for success. So interdepartmental collaboration as well as our city-county collaboration has made the program more efficient and more easy for people to understand as a resident and a user experience. Just a few of the departments we've leaned on are CAPE, Parks, Sanitation, Austin Sustainability, and the county solid waste have all been key collaborators. Next slide, please. So these are our recommendations. In order to operationalize this program, we'd like to pursue an interlocal agreement with Buncombe County for collaborative management and co-funding. We feel that this is important to improve efficiency in operations and cost, the customer user experience, and avoiding confusion from the residents who are using these sites. If it's one unified program, it feels easier and more clear from a user experience. And we have demonstrated successful collaboration to date. We've kind of worked through some kinks and bumps in the road and feel like we've been able to demonstrate that this is a good partnership going forward. And then in terms of looking into the future, we're looking to FY24 when we have the 8 sites up and running to just continue the program with those existing sites for observation, data collection, see how it's going, hear from our residents. If we identify a need or desire to continue expansion, then a budgetary request would come forward in FY25 or in the future after that time. Next slide, please. So this is our action requested from y'all today to move forward to City Council with a recommendation to approve developing an interlocal agreement with Buncombe County for the co-management of this program. Next slide. Just to recap on our key takeaways today, we know that food waste reduction and organics diversion are key strategies to address some of the city's waste reduction, greenhouse gas goals, and some of the items that were identified in the climate emergency resolution. So far, we've been able to identify that residents are in fact willing and interested in driving their food scraps around to support this organics diversion. We know that we need to lead hard into our interdepartmental participation and collaboration, both internally and also with our partners at the county. And an interlocal agreement with Buncombe County is needed to help support operationalization of this program. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kira. I appreciate that. It was pretty impressive, with the number you were saying that signed up, 3,800, that's 4% of city residents. That's a lot of people that are willing to drive their waste. I can only imagine as we make this easier, the potential for what this could be one day. The only thing I'd add is I serve on the county's Environment and Energy Subcommittee, and we met last Friday, and I'm going to give an update later about some other parts of that, but the head of the solid waste department at the county was there giving us some other updates, mentioned this, a lot of enthusiasm, support. Sounds like a really great working relationship, which I just love to hear when we're strongly collaborating with the county. So just to reinforce that, and I found this really exciting. Councilwoman, any questions or comments about this program?
Well, I'm excited to see it up and running and excited to see that it's in a local agreement with the Buncombe County. And so looking forward to it.
I'll make the motion. I'll make a motion to recommend the approval of developing an interlocal agreement with Buncombe County.
This is Sandra. I'll second.
Fantastic. Roll call vote. Vice Mayor Kilgore.
Aye.
Councilwoman Smith.
Aye.
And myself, aye. The motion passes. We are thrilled to see this progressing forward, and we'll see it on the 9th of May. Great work, everybody. This is really hopeful.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right. We are moving on to agenda item number 4, which is the citywide emergency operations preparedness and continuity of operations plan. Welcome. And this is information sharing to keep up with the progress. Take it away.
Good morning. Thank you, Vice Mayor, council members. I appreciate the opportunity to come speak to you today about very exciting operational plans that we have that are I want to give you an update on kind of what we're doing, where we are, what the next steps are. And then I'm going to take kind of a deeper dive into each of them and then offer some time up for some questions. So next slide, please. Yes, the key takeaways, again, these are plans that were funded as a part of this year, and we're working hard on getting these done, and it's a multifaceted approach that we're using. We've had a very collaboration has kind of been the key from the very beginning of this to make these as successful as what we want them to be. And I'm very excited in the progress. We're actually ahead of schedule. So hopefully we're going to be, having the finished product here before the fall. So, but again, the key takeaways, these two plans, and again, there are two of them, they reflect our current organization within the city when responding to emergencies as the emergency operations plan goes. And as the continuity of operations plan, how's that, provides that framework and that anchor system for continuing to provide those essential services when we've taken some kind of impact. So I really want to highlight the participation and the active involvement of all of our teammates here within the city staff. We've been meeting together once a week each month and having very honest and open and frank and collaborative conversations that are lots of innovation, lots of diversity and thought. And we're at a point now where we're starting to move ahead in the process, and we're beginning with our multifaceted strategy of engaging in our community with not only through a survey, which I'll talk about a little later, but also the one-on-one conversation and that the communication and dialogue to promote that personal preparedness and build that resilience. So those are the key takeaways. Next slide, please. So kind of a project overview, pretty high level here. These are the three pillars, if you will, of the project. The emergency operations plan, again, provides that framework, how we organize ourselves, how we prepare, how we respond, and then how we recover. There's two things that every incident or event has in common. It begins local and it ends local. And so what we're trying to do is organize ourselves in a way that promotes that culture of shared ownership during one of these response. When we have an event or an incident, that we come together collectively and prepare and respond, which having this plan anchors us in that efficiency and does so that we can return to a new normal faster. It improves that response time. On the other side is the continuity plan, the continuity of operations plan. It gives us that framework of how we continue to provide those services as a city when again, we're members of the community as well. And when we take an impact to maybe our facility or one of the things that we have operational wise, how do we continue those essential services during that emergency and how we continue? Again, we went through a massive continuity of operations event the past several years with COVID. And so this platform, this plan specifically provides a framework and a canvas for us to capture those after action items and things, those successes that we had and how we pivoted and how we painted that picture or enables us to paint the picture of how we did that during the COVID-19 pandemic, and so that we won't lose that progress, we won't lose those after action items. So that's kind of where that's going to line up. And then the one that really supports and is the true foundation is that community engagement. So we're working very hard, leveraging our relationships through extensive, not only as a team inside the city, but also our vertical stakeholders, with the county, as well as wherever we can leverage that. We're looking at these plans through the equity lens as making sure that everyone in our community has input, and we're trying to reach everybody where they are and see what kind of input they are, what kind of input they have, but also when we go again, this is a first touch, this is a first introduction to a lot of this, and we want to make sure that not only are we showing, getting that input and informing these plans, but also when we come back next time, we're able to kind of paint that picture and draw a line where this is the input you provided to us during the planning process, and this is where it lives. This is how we took that feedback and how we operationalized it in our preparedness and our planning to build that neighborhood resilience, build that resilience at that particular level. So those are kind of the three big project overviews and the three big pillars that we'll talk about. Next slide, please. So a lot there's differences between the two. Again, the emergency operations side of the house and then the continuity side of the house. This graphic just tries to break that down a little better, which, emergency operations on one side, what the purpose is how we manage these emergencies. And then when we activate these plans, when some type of significant hazard requiring that communication, coordination, and collaboration amongst city departments to respond to this. And again, this is that how we are organized, promoting that culture of shared ownership within the departments to respond to these events. And then kind of on the continuity side of the house, the continuity of operations plan, we're prioritizing essential functions that the city has to maintain. How we get those systems back up by prioritizing that within ourselves, how we implement things and how we add things to what our response looks like when we as a city take an impact. So any situation that could impact those essential functions, again, such as loss of personnel, equipment, infrastructure, how do we keep going? How do we get back on our feet to keep providing those essential services? And again, both of these plans from day one, looking through the lens of equity, looking through the lens of sustainability to make sure that we're obtaining and absorbing all of that input into both. And again, equity, inclusion, and sustainability have been key stakeholders and key teammates in the development of this, is not only in the plans, but as we move forward in the community engagement. And I really want to highlight their work that they've done. Everybody has done a huge lift, but they've kind of, we've been together since day one on this, and I really appreciate it. So next slide, please. The community engagement, what we're after, what we're looking for is we want to understand lots of data sets that are out there. There's data from all of our different stakeholders that exist, state, federal, FEMA, you name it, they each have a data set. But we want to make sure that we're responsive to, and what we want to understand, the hazards, threats, and vulnerabilities from the community's perspective and from that lived experience perspective. What are those expectations? And then again, how do we promote that for personal preparedness? What spaces and how do we want to interact with, how do you want to interact with staff when we talk about promoting personal preparedness? And that preparedness and that building that resilience at the community, how can we help that? How can we inform that? This particular circle that you see on the right is kind of the thought process and how we're going about it. We're wanting that personal participation. We're going into the communities at different meetings. Last night, I was fortunate enough to speak at the NAC. Had a really good conversation, lots of great questions, very good interaction. Then having that trusted community dialogue like we did last night and like we already have this morning. And then we take that feedback, analyze it, look at what we were able to receive, track the progress. And then as we continue, that's going to help us inform the education, the outreach, and our training as we move forward. And then again, this is not a once through. This is an ongoing conversation that's going to depend on everyone working together to promote those outcomes and build that resilience at the neighborhood level and at that personal level. So that's kind of what the community engagement and kind of what we're after. And the first piece of that is with the survey that we'll talk about. Next slide, please. So the survey's live now. We'll provide links. We've tapped into all of our resources here as a team, all the teammates that we have within the city. Look at put it out on all of our social media pages. We've established a dedicated web space that has been created where people can go find out more information, see the results of the survey, the types of questions that we're asking. We really want to know how we can improve that preparedness and how do we manage that expectations? Who do you want to hear from? What that messaging needs to be, and where are we going to interact with each other, and what that space looks like. So some meetings and things we've already used, again, with the Sustainability Department, Equity Inclusion, had a great meeting with Asheville Housing Authority, and we're using Kate and all the resources that are already longstanding, trusted, established relationships to get this message out, and really appreciate all the heavy lift that everyone's doing in support of this community engagement effort. Next slide, please. So kind of where we've been. Again, this was a huge undertaking by many in every single department, not only internal to the city, but even collaboration with our county stakeholders as well. In January, we talked about the kickoff and what we did. We released some training to get city staff up to speed on what we're doing, why we're going to do this. We looked at data that we already had, the work that had already gone in, climate justice map, the resiliency assessment that we had gone through, not only here locally, where our data that we started, but as well as our state regional reports and all of the things that we had accessible to us to begin this process. In February, we started with our planning workshops. We talked about our risk profile. We met with every single city department and talked about what the continuity looks like, what are priorities. But only that, with our EOP, we looked at that risk profile on what are response opportunities, what non-traditional response capabilities do we have? What does talent look like within our organization that we can pivot to use in times of need or times of disaster to help us collaboratively respond and tap into things that we may not have tapped into before. March, again, had another successful planning workshop where we talked about how we organize, what we look like as far as structure, how we manage incidents currently, where we are, where we've been, where we want to go. And then the formation of these plans that I'm going to talk about a little deeper here in a few minutes. And then the community engagement. We talked about working with Kate, working on those strategies, goals, looking at the survey, what kind of questions we wanted to ask, how are we going to use the data to inform the plans once we got them. And then in April, obviously, we've hit the ground running once again with another successful planning workshop that really starts to dig into the weeds, talk about each department, again, meeting with every single department on response capabilities, continuity questions, things like how do we prioritize for our IT department when everyone depends so heavily on IT to keep us up and running? How do we manage expectations with them in these times of need? And what does that response look like? So again, lots of great conversation, and then forecasting out to April. So next slide, please. Again, so, again, following up on that, beginning the community engagement, we've already had a few meetings, reaching out to those stakeholders, talking about that, and then forecasting ahead. And in May, we're at the 75% mark of this project. And so we're going to sit down and kind of where we've been and practice. We're going to do a little training, and also we're going to sit around as city staff and the key planning team and have a tabletop to make sure that these plans are actually what we do, and have an exercise to inform what the after action and how we continue to move forward in the plans. This is a really good pulse check for where we are in the process. We're beginning to start to receive some of the community feedback. And again, the community feedback is an ongoing conversation that's going to continue to inform these plans. So it's not a one-off. It's a conversation, and it's that dialogue truly following that circle that we had originally. Looking at the data, making sure that our plans are data-driven, data-informed, and again, making sure that we're those touch points at that 75% mark, or we're actually doing and we're able to operationalize what the plan said. And then kind of looking forward, this is what we have in June. We're getting really close. Another planning workshop, continuing with the community meetings, looking at some of that final survey data. And then again, once again in July, exercising these plans, more community meetings. And then August, we're going to have a final draft of each of the EOP, Emergency Operations Plan, and the Continuity of Operations Plan in our hands to review. And again, this is just the beginning. These plans are definitely, they're going to be written documents, but these plans are living, breathing, and they have they are full of life. So as soon as we have the draft, they will pretty much remain in it. They'll be finalized, but They're only finalized because we'll start this process again. Because one of the things we want to make sure, as things change, these plans must change. As we find ways to improve, as we find data sets out there that can help us inform this, we want to make sure that all of those things are captured, these tools are captured within these plans, and then we continue to exercise and train on them. And obviously at the end, we'll also have an after action report, and that kind of points us the way forward. And so we're super excited about these next steps, and we look forward to coming back and communicating further as we hit some of these milestones. Next steps, please. Or I'm sorry, next slide. So I'm looking at each of the plans individually. We'll start with the continuity of operations plan. We'll look at what that looks like and kind of take a deeper dive here in just a second, and then we'll get into the emergency operations side of the house. So next slide, please. In order for us to have that successful continuity of operations program, obviously the plan's a key point of that, but it's more importantly, it's the program that's what's going to make this, and the support from all of our teammates to make this happen. Day-to-day essential functions. What do we do? How do we get going again? And what are those? We have to be able to prioritize and make sure that we're using the most informed, data-driven and feedback from our community, what the expectations are. And then this plan's going to identify those people, technology, resources, facilities, and making sure that we have backup plans. When do we fail over to specific things, and what are those systems that are the backup plan, and how do we build in redundancies in our system to maintain that continuity, and where do those redundancies need to live? Lots of opportunity, lots of engagement around this, but we also want to make sure that we're using the subject matter experts and the talent that we have on the team to inform that, so that everyone is coming at this with very collaborative, but also understanding where we are in the process and what something like this could look like. Next slide, please. So kind of where we are with this particular plan and the status. We have drafts. Each of the city staff have looked at these. They have the copies of these in their hands, and we're looking at those shared priorities. We're looking at the interdependencies that we have. I pointed to IT earlier as a huge interdependency, and equity, inclusion as an interdependency, sustainability as an interdependency. All the departments depend on some of the elements in these different departments and programs to do our daily functions. And so we want to make sure that when we have an impact, we want to make sure we know what those are and how to explain them and can shed light. So each department's going to have, there's going to be a base plan, and each department's going to have their own annex that's tailored to their department. So this is what happens to for example, the fire department. When we have an impact, this is what we do. This is how we pick up and get going again. So May 10th, we'll have that draft that will be completed as a draft. And then we'll talk about the tabletops that I spoke of earlier on May 24th. And in June, we'll have that 100% mark. And then we'll be exercising again. So if you look at this stair-step graphic, we're planning, we're practicing, we're discussing, we're going back to the table, looking at that, and then we're practicing it again, and before we reach that ultimate mark of the final adopted plan in August. So it's a continuous process that we're going through, and we're continually checking our work and making sure that we're capturing every element of this, as it's so important to maintain those city essential services. Next slide, please. I'll stop right here for just a second, and if there's any specific questions related to continuity, and again, if not, we'll move on to the emergency operations side of the house. But I want to give a moment here and have some discussion, or if there's any questions, I'll definitely be happy to answer them.
I have a question. Oh, Councilwoman Smith, it looks like you had something.
It's always a joy to hear you present, Jeremy. It's always thorough information. I wanted to understand, when you talk about the city's risk profile, is that the risks that are in the organization, or does that encompass our entire community?
It's really our entire community. What those hazards are that we're vulnerable to. Many could say, as an example, not only will this profile and then what we're hearing back from the community, but we know through the climate resiliency assessment that wildfire, nuisance flooding, major flooding, those are hazards we're susceptible to. And so that as a part of this risk profile, we know that ahead of time. So how can we organize ourselves to respond to those types of events? But also, how do we prepare our community and build that resiliency and capacity at that block level to help with that? And then as a city, what are we susceptible to? If it floods or we have, a type of a wildfire, what impact to city services do we have, and how do we prepare for that? And how do we increase their resiliency so that we maintain that no matter what's happening outside? But also many times it's a expectations management. We're in as a part of this community too, and in that risk profile, we're susceptible to these hazards as a city as well.
And when you have the conversation with the Neighborhood Advisory Commission, I don't know their official title, but is there a plan for them to survey their full community? How are they moving forward with their level of community engagement?
Absolutely. We're sharing with them. Obviously, there's a link that we've shared with the survey that's going to go out first. We're going to supply them with some flyers that they can put up. But also, if they have the their community meetings, we're going to come speak and interact and have that conversation one-on-one and find out from them, that lived experience and just hopefully have that dialogue to dive a little deeper than the survey allows us to.
And will that involve per neighborhood, like a resource map? Like, what are their capabilities to respond to crisis? And are they going to draft like neighborhood-based recovery plans?
Yeah, and I think this first pass is to hear from them what they have already. And in the survey, we asked to specifically questions, related to emergency response. Where do you turn to during an emergency? Is it your neighbor? Is it your neighborhood? Is it someone in your community that does this? We want to find out what's happening and what they're doing first to see where we can support and how do we build that up. And then we recognize that in many, there are formal neighborhoods that are established and have these things established, but there are a lot that aren't. One of the conversation topics that came up last night is, what are we going to do for that? And when we want to know that, and also how do we build that capacity there? And how do we, the new folks that are moving to this area that are visiting, how do we include those in that? So those are definitely some strategic conversations we're having and using those neighborhood connectors with Kate to talk through that.
Thank you.
Okay, if no other questions, did anyone have anything about the continuity side?
I had a question, and I don't know if it's for the continuity or the emergency preparedness. And it's kind of, given that the community has a very real emergency in our minds relevant recently with the water outage, and that this really collaborative process that you've been starting, has there been any interaction with the external review committee that is helping us come up with recommendations to be even more prepared and have better continuity of operations in our water utility? Are we learning anything from that emergency we just had? Just kind of curious how that's coming up as you're going through this process.
Absolutely. It's a great question, and it's kind of related to continuity as well as emergency operations. I think yes, the short answer is yes. Lots of the discussions and the things we're talking about in this as amongst the planning team, and the planning team that's represented by 1 to 2 from every department. internally. It has been revolving around that. We're obviously receiving questions from that panel that we're answering, and there's questions that you can we've organized into several different types of buckets, if you will. And so we're making sure that as those questions are coming in from the panel, that not only are we answering them, for the panel, but we're making sure that there's kind of a flow chart, and they're represented in these plans. And not only represented in the plans, but we're going to be exercising to kind of complete that circle. So when we have tabletop exercises, lots of the familiar themes are coming up in that, and how we respond to that as well.
And
Thank you.
Councilmember
Yeah.
Ullman, if I could add, Jeremy is absolutely correct in terms of how we are trying to incorporate information, but I also want to add, he said this is an iterative process. So as we get the actual recommendations back from the group, because their work is not completed, we'll be incorporating and assessing, I think, the appropriateness of those actions that could be added to the plan. Jeremy, am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, you are.
Just makes me so grateful that despite having had something that was really scary and really hard for our community, that the timing has lined up where we are doing such a thorough, collaborative, well-resourced look on how to continue these operations, how to involve the community. It just feels like this will really reinforce what we're learning from the water outage and really just help us prepare. So, yeah, and all the work that you're doing with the community engagement, Councilwoman Smith, that you were kind of helping us understand more of, like, this isn't just about staff, it's all of us being really ready. So I find this really hopeful.
And if I could add one other thing, which is the individual preparedness. It's one thing for us as a city organization to be prepared, but it's vitally important that individuals are prepared. And I think some of this will ring true. And if nothing else, just the awareness that you individually have to also be prepared.
And take care of your
emergency. You got to.
Your neighbors, because if we're all rowing in the same direction when something happens, it's not that we're just reliant on, like, we just take care of each other, and we have a role to play, and neighborhoods do, and I go check on my neighbor, etc. All right, don't mean to hold you up. Let's keep moving. I know that there's a lot to cover today.
All right, Nick, thank you. Great. Thanks for that. Absolutely. This is definitely an iterative process. So look forward to continuing it. It's very exciting. Next slide, please. So now to talk more on the emergency operations. Again, next slide, please. How we organize. It's very important that this plan be adaptable, scalable, and leverages our strengths. That's the key to it. We're using these past incidents, as I spoke to earlier. Where do we do good? How can we improve? What are the weaknesses that we might have in that risk profile, the vulnerabilities? All of that coming together in a collaborative process to really nail down these capabilities and where we're going. We set those objectives. We move forward after those objectives with solid strategy and tactics from subject matter experts that are achievable and time sensitive. Each department has a role. We're leveraging every single person that we have, every unique skill set. We're using our HR teammates, working with them on collaborating. How do we find talent where we've never looked before, where we've never reached into pockets? And there are lots of unique skill sets, but also there's a lot of skill sets that aren't unique. And we have lots of talent in every department that can do things that maybe we've never asked them to do and never been a part. And so that's why every single department has a role in this. We're overcoming challenges. I think as we look through this, as we work through this process, we're facing challenges. We're over reliant on many, and so what does that look like? How do we improve our bench depth? How do we improve our strength, build that capacity? There's a small group of, the city employees that support those emergency operations. So how do we train to a standard? How do we train to a point? How do we keep them informed? And then how do we plug them in? Obviously, there's lots of need for training. This plan is going to outline where we're headed and what we're doing. And this is going to give us a standard to train to. So now we can manage expectations, not only in response, but in that training. And also the ongoing investment in emergency operations. This program, this plan, this is not a once through process. It's iterative. We're going to continue this. The ink will never dry on these plans, because that's kind of where complacency and things can creep in. So these are living, breathing documents, and this program is a living, breathing document. But we're challenged. We're working through that. And the nice thing about having a diverse group of people is that innovative thought on how we do that. It's not just, it's very easy to focus on challenges, but the neat thing about this planning team and how we've come together is we're solution driven. We're data and solution driven. And that's super excited to see folks interacting in ways that we may have never thought about. So pretty excited about that moving forward. Next slide, please. So this is just so you can kind of paint a picture of where we are and where we've been. And this is the planning process. I showed a slide very similar to this when we kicked this project off several months ago. And this just kind of paints a picture on where we are right now and the work that's been done and the time that's been devoted to this to make sure that, again, the document's one thing, but the process is so important. And the document is a manifestation of the robust and inclusive process that we've gone through to get us to that point. And, it again, just to put all that into a slide is pretty hard. But what we tried here, just so you can kind of see what's coming, that core planning team, I can't say enough about it. From day one, the things that we're doing, the understanding our risk, talking about vulnerabilities, identifying resources. Where do we get intelligence? What information does that look like? As an example of that intelligence, the climate, the social justice map. How do we improve that? How do we move it forward? How do we, as a team, pushing this forward and improving that? And then obviously that's in that plan development, but writing the plan, getting these thoughts, getting these ideas down on paper so that we have something to exercise and to vocalize and to talk about. Once this is done, we're looking now getting approvals. Every department has these plans in their hands. They're going to have that 75% draft on in beginning next month. To really nail this down and move forward. And then that maintain, implement, maintain, and improve, we're going to train to this. There's going to be, more work involved, but at least we're all on the same page and moving forward together. And we're organized, collaborative, and we have the cooperation from all of our stakeholders moving this forward internally and externally. We're getting so many good ideas on what this could look like and what this iteration just from already even today. How do we use those non-traditional responders in this and tap into that talent, thus improving our bench depth and process. Next slide, please. So as a brief high-level overview, this is kind of what it's going to look like. You've got the base plan, which anchors us, talks about that hazard profile, what we're vulnerable to, high level of explanation on how we're going to operate, and then roles and responsibilities. It's very important to manage expectations. You have to know what you're responsible for and what your role is. And so that's going to be very, very detailed in that base plan. And that's what we're going to anchor to when we anchor to that on how we operate. So it's consistent. Again, we're building that culture of shared ownership and crisis and collaborative support among all city stakeholders in that base plan to then inform the hazard-specific procedures. We know already through the data that we have locally what we're vulnerable to: extreme heat, flooding, pandemic, wildfire, as an example. We know that going in, so we can go ahead and kind of prescript procedures and how we're going to act in the specific things using information that we already have to inform these plans of what we can expect and how we respond to those specific hazards, both the common and unique. And then each department, again, back to that roles and responsibilities. Here, what I'm responsible for, who leads it, who supports it. There are many cross sections and cross functions, but again, if you're the lead of it or if you support it, it's very important to know that so you can be prepared, be trained up, and we can start creating that bench depth and that capacity within our departments and on our team for those departmental specific operations. We want to put the subject matter experts. We want them dealing with the issue, and the rest of the city. How do we come with them, come around them, support them through that? By taking some of that work, the ancillary work off of them so that they can focus on the problem and get us back to normal and get us back to that new normal, whatever the situation may dictate. Next slide, please. All right. I know that was a lot. Again, this is such a robust process. I'm going to kind of open it up again just one more time for any questions related to that emergency operations, how we organize, what we've learned, anything that I can be of assistance to and help. I'll open the floor.
Thank you so much for all that information. I guess a question, and I don't know if this is for you or Deborah, is my sense is that this isn't a policy, right? This is an operational plan, and that this is something that when you're concluding, it doesn't necessarily come to council for adoption since it's largely operations based. Is that right? And if not, like, where is that policy overlap?
Jeremy, I don't think that we have taken plans in the past to council because, as you said, Ms. Ullman, it is an operational plan, but we think as elected officials, you all in these types of emergencies have a significant role to play, especially the mayor in terms of declaring emergencies, so to speak. So yeah, we want to keep you all very informed about these two plans. So there may be some things that come out like some budget implications, for example, in terms of implementation. But from a policy perspective, I can't think of any, Jeremy, that we may need to bring forward.
Not at this time, but I think the process is not over yet, and so we're taking a really deep dive into that to see what those policy implications, what those budget implications, and we're going to have a really good summary at the end of this. But you're right, Ms. Campbell, the elected officials have a part in this, but also how do we what can we provide? Are there guides, there checklists, or things? How do you plug in as elected officials to a response? What do you expect? And all those are going to be a part of this. That we'll do some training with you. We'll show you and walk you through some of these steps and the things that we're going to go through as staff, and how you can help us and how we can help you. Again, those roles and responsibilities are important, and we have to communicate that, and we're going to through these plans.
And one of the major objectives we feel, which Ms. Ullman, you talked about the water interruption that we had during December, is communication. How do we maintain not only communication with elected officials and internally, but also with the community?
This is exciting. Other questions from council?
I have just one question. I was just wondering, I realize this is the City of Asheville emergency operation plan, whatever. And I was just wondering, after you finally get everything in order, is it going to actually check and see if there's overlap with emergency plans, so it can actually how they interact together? Will there be any kind of movement toward that, uh, that type of plan, because we, you know what I mean? I was just wondering, that type of collaboration with them, if need be.
Absolutely. And with I can speak to the county and the state specifically on that. So we're following national best practice. So we're in line with FEMA and with all of the things at the federal, that allow us to have these plans, and we're following their guidance. And so the state and the county does as well. So a lot of the language is familiar.
Yes.
One of the things we have, we wanted to make sure of in these plans is that we're using the same language, so that many times if like we see our friends and neighbors on the coast, when they have hurricanes, they call for outside resources to come in. And the success in that is they're calling each other the same thing, and they're speaking the same language. And so when we talk about how we need help and how we can communicate that, because we've given a lot of help throughout the years, but luckily we never really had to ask for it. But making sure we're on the same language. So when we're calling something, whatever it is, we're speaking the same language. As with the county specifically and the state, again, we're following those same rules. The initial step, the county helped us choose the team that's helping us with this to collect this information. And so they've been with us from the very beginning. And then next month, we're going to be looking at the county's plans and our plans to make sure that, there's several interdependencies that we have with each other. So how do we identify those? How do we make sure that we have redundancies built in, and what that expectations management looks like? For example, resource ordering. If we need help from outside, how do we get it? The county has a huge piece of that. And so communicating those goals, priorities, and having these plans there, that will only further the conversation and help us with that coordination with those horizontal and vertical stakeholders.
Thank you, Jerry.
Would you need interlocal agreement for those partnerships?
I think we have them already in the form of mutual aid agreements that have been long established. But I think the interdependencies would be if, speaking to continuity, if we receive impacts to one of our buildings, what building stock do we have to maybe move offices, or, how do we work together and with our IT? How are we connected? Lots of different ways that we are connected already. But I think in this plan and these specific plans are, we want to maybe eliminate some redundancy, increase our collaboration, and that will make us more efficient and be able to respond faster. And I think that where these hook together are in numerous spots, but just making sure we both identify those spots and are able to support them.
When it comes to incorporating our neighborhood feedback, I'm just wondering how we manage their expectation, because I'm imagining that it may lead to an investment from the city, because they might ask for some type of improvement to facilities in their neighborhoods. How will we prioritize their request?
Yeah, I think great question. I think the priorities are going to be obviously that depending on the incident, right? That's kind of the big unknown, is that depending on the incident. These plans are both all hazards plans. So no matter what happens, we're gonna organize the same way. We're gonna communicate the same way. We're gonna communicate consistently the same way. And I think when they hear that, when we have that conversation about what we're doing and how we're organizing, I think that they may be creative to how they can plug into that. And then I think as we go down the road of prioritization, it's going to come back to that, obviously that life safety, and then how we stabilize what's going on, and then that property conservation, kind of in that order. This is a huge life safety, public safety. There are lots of implications related to that. So I think that would be how we would prioritize. If it's life safety, and then the stabilization, maybe what can we do to mitigation, and then, the property conservation. So that's kind of how I see that moving forward. But again, I'm open. We're open. I think there's probably some innovation out there that we have not thought about that we can tap into and really get maybe some energy, create some momentum at that block level to build that resilience.
It makes me think of the municipal climate action plan that we just adopted. One of the program areas in that plan is around resilience hubs and really making sure that each community has a place, and that I just see that concept as a safe place where the lights are on, the heat is on, there's fresh water, whatever the needs are to get people through preparing for that emergency. And that doesn't always need to be a city building, right? There's already hubs that each community goes to. And so that's what I think of when I hear you ask some of these questions, Councilwoman Smith and Division Chief Knighton, kind of what does that look like? And I know that's a little bit further down, right? We need to get the plans and do all this engagement. But I think all of this work now is the work to get us to, and then how do we collaborate in the community once we're really doing the preparation?
Absolutely. That's a great point. We really want to meet them where they are, and we want to support the things that they have established and then help them establish those things as we move forward that in areas that they're not.
Other
And
questions?
we also want to build upon some foundational work that we've done. I mean, Councilmember Allman, you just talked about the hubs and climate justice. And I think Jeremy mentioned that in terms of kind of our baseline, lots of coordination, integration, because we are not trying to just do 75 different plans that have no interaction or they don't complement one another. We're continuing to build upon foundational work.
Absolutely.
I have one last question. I get really geeked up about this. I don't know.
I love it.
I'm just wondering, like in the future, when we have a final draft and everybody understands very clearly roles and responsibilities from council to organization and within communities, are we going to have like a training exercise where we can run through stuff?
Absolutely, 110%. You took the words right out of my mouth. A plan is no good unless we have a program to train and an exercise to actually show off what we learned and exercise the plan. Those are critical. And if we're not training to and exercising, then these plans will not be as lively as they should be. So exercising is critical. And I know you and I went through the senior officials workshop together. So like that, but it maybe will be a little more complex, on incidents and data and using tools that we have and that we have had. These plans are anchored to really bring them to the forefront and highlight that and not reinvent the wheel. We're not reinventing anything. Lots of this is already, the talent and time has already been invested in this. We're taking all that and capturing it and capturing that progress that we've been making for so many years.
That sounds awesome.
Thank you. A lot of excellent work. I know the plan that we have in place is a little outdated, so I really appreciate your inclusive process and how you have spelled it out so thoroughly. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thanks again. And the last slide is just kind of a QR code. That's again the key takeaways, and then one more slide, please. I think there's maybe some QR. Well, no, I think that's it. But we'll be getting the survey out. The survey's out there already. We'll be producing some flyers, so we'll definitely looking for any ideas on how to get this information out there and get the survey in the hands of our community members. So thanks again for letting me speak.
Thanks so much. Sign us up for the scenario thing. That'll be really cool. I also want to say before you leave, and I know Credit is on also, I know there was a really dangerous fire yesterday and that several of our firefighters they were all well trained. Everyone took care of each other, but there were some pretty scary moments where we were concerned about life. And we're all thinking about y'all. And especially those officers. I know they're on their way home, but thanks for your work and please send our love.
We will for sure, and thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay, more conversation. Agenda item 5 is our community responder program led by our Assistant Fire Chief, Patrick Crudup. So those thoughts go to you as well and your teams, but share all this progress. I feel like y'all are gearing up in the next couple of days to launch this super exciting pilot. Can't wait to hear what you have to share today.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman Ullman. Good afternoon, Councilwoman Smith and Vice Mayor Kilgore, city staff, and those who are listening in. Thank you for your thoughts and concerns towards our firefighters yesterday. They are well trained and very much so take care of one another, but thank you for your thoughts. I'm going to be providing an update for the Community Responder Program. The last week or so, they've been hard at it. A lot of things have happened. And they still have a full week ahead of them before we kick off on May 1st. So, but they're out there right now. They're getting after it. So we're looking forward to May 1st kickoff. All right. So next slide. All right. So our key takeaways, the pilot program is going to proactively support efforts of Buncombe County, APD, Homeward Bound Street Outreach teams, and other partners to address health and safety needs of individuals. The focus of the initial pilot will be in the downtown Asheville area. That's going to include our park garages, in front of our businesses, our parks, other areas where our responders can get to. They're going to be using different transportations, which we'll talk about that later in the presentation. Staff for the program have been selected. They've been in training last week, as well as some this week, and more coming this week they're going to be training. We'll cover some of that in this presentation as well. We're on track for the May 1st launch date, and we're coordinating with the 60-day downtown safety initiative. That's something that's going to be exciting and something to look forward to as well. Next slide, please. All right, the vision for the Community Responder Program to focus collective efforts to assist persons that are unsheltered and or experiencing behavioral health issues. Efforts will be initially focused in the downtown area, as I mentioned. Support for local businesses, residents, and the unsheltered population to address concerns related to health and safety of individuals before they escalate. So what this looked like is providing those wraparound services. Right now, we have our responders out. They're doing pre-plans all last week and this week of areas where they're going to go back to on May 1st and connect to some of those services for the people who are experiencing crises. We're going to coordinate with Buncombe County, APD, Homeward Bound, and others to assist with health and safety needs. Next slide, please. Roles, duties, and responsibilities. So the role for the community responders to serve as a connector for those experiencing crises. We have a list of resources that we've compiled and worked through. We're meeting at, as you can see, we're meeting at the Haywood Street congregation, where a lot of resources come to on Wednesdays. So every Wednesday they'll be there, as well as some of the training, kind of skipping down some of the training. We have our fire department training, which are medical staff. We are equity and inclusion. We meet on Mondays. We've got an opioid diversion webinar coming up this week. GIS is one of the things that we're going to be using to kind of identify where our population is located. And that way we can perform that wraparound service and reach back out to those individuals to make sure they're receiving the services that they need. Haywood Street congregation, as well as coordinated with the Buncombe County MCOT team. That's the mobile community outreach. We're going to be using different transportations, as well as different technologies, working through our scheduling. As we mentioned before, it's going to be 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week. They have actually came in as early as 5 this past week to kind of identify where our populations are. And if they're in the downtown area at a particular time, or if they're moving to other areas outside of the downtown area. So they have made, They have made connections with those individuals at various hours of the day. So that pilot program, again, is scheduled to launch on May 1st. So that's next Monday. And we're looking forward. Next slide. So here's our tentative timeline of May 1st through June the 30th. At the end of that time, we're going to compile some data, which actually we'll be compiling data as we move along. So that 2-month, we'll report out on that data, but we will have data weekly. Next slide, please. Again, a recap on these key takeaways: pilot program, proactively support existing efforts, focus on the initial pilot program downtown. Staffing for the program has been selected. That's 5 personnel that we're going to use. They're going to rotate on their schedule. So the county has a team that's going to be rotating as well. So that's 2 teams operating at one time. And the May 1st kickoff date. Next slide. Any questions? Yes, ma'am, Ms. Campbell.
The only thing that I wanted to add is that when we say this is a pilot program for community responders, we, from a city perspective, city manager's office perspective, is we are wanting to evolve this initiative into a service. And so, yes, we're starting downtown, but potentially the initiative may go to other parts of the community. But I didn't want anyone to think that this is one and done, that after 60 days or when we get the assessment back in August, that it's going to go away. We really feel this is a critical need in our community, and we want to use the data to truly understand resource needs and investment levels that are needed. And Patrick, if I've said something inaccurate or that you're surprised at, then please let me know.
Not surprised at all. That's 100% correct. Not surprised at all.
Any questions, Councilwoman?
What does training look like? Are you all using a training model?
Yes, so we are working some with the county on their training. Well, going forward, we're working some with the county on their training. In the past week, we've received training on GIS. That's for our documentation and data collection. And what that does is that kind of pinpoints where we need to be and where we need to refer back to. It also shows us where we aren't. So that also can tell us what areas we need to be in as well. Some of the other training we received through the Homeless Strategy Division within the city, which tells us how we are to interact, because we're first responders. So usually we are response mode. So with the training with the Homeless Strategy Division, that gives us an idea how we are to address our unsheltered population.
And just to add on that, I know that Patrick, you and I had been on a couple of emails that some community members were asking about kind of what does diversity, equity, and inclusion training look like in the fire department as you're just in relationship with different populations. Could you share a little bit about that? I was really impressed to hear the work that you're doing, but I think it'd be nice for everyone to know.
Yes, so in addition to the equity and inclusion piece, there's a crisis incident management piece. That's another piece of training that we receive in this group. But the equity and inclusion piece, we meet with that office on Mondays, our office here, departmental office. We have a diversity, equity, and inclusion team within our department, but then we meet and receive instructions and trainings from the equity and inclusion office, which is headed up by Ms. Mills. And Marcus Kirkman is actually the one who oversees the fire department where we receive our training.
I have a thought. It's not completely formed yet, but so here's where I'm going. I don't want the effort of the community response team to be seen as moving people along. So we're only as strong as our resources. We can only manage situations and respond effectively if we have robust crisis care resources and systems. So what do we have? What do we have in our toolkit to assist people once we encounter a person in crisis or a person who needs some type of wraparound services? And are they robust enough? And or is that what we're kind of surveying? Like, where are the areas where we're insufficient?
So good question. Yes. So we do have a resource list that covers housing, healthcare, mental health, substance abuse. So we have a list of all those services that we're going to be using to connect individuals with. If there is something that we come across that we may not have, that may be a gap that is identified that we may need to try to circle back to figure out where those services, how to create those services.
That's a great question. I know that when I've talked with Buncombe County's community responder program folks, that, they've just shared examples where they get called in or they find someone in need and they just spend time with them until they know that if there was a safe place for a lot of folks on the streets to go, they would. And we need to get more of those safe caring places, be more focused and precise in us figuring out how we can step in with community partners to get more of those safe places for folks to go when they're in need.
Yeah, I'm connecting the dots between you all's response and our need for more non-congregate beds, and maybe an additional need for crisis respite beds, which I know a lot of cities do when they're bringing enhancement to their crisis care program. So I'm just foreseeing that there is a connection between what we're doing in response to our unhoused population and what we can do in connection with getting people out of crisis.
Yeah, it does make me think. I know that after the homelessness report that we received in January, that there's really good work being done from the committee and from several different people working on this. I think that making sure that once we get kind of the recommendations from those subgroups about where we go next, that we're really making sure that we're connecting those dots. I think it's really appropriate that as emergency responders, we're stepping up with our existing service. This is part of our charter, and so I think that's really a great place. And there's places that aren't as crystal clear, so we need to step in and grow more for those shelter beds like you're talking about, Councilwoman Smith. Manager Campbell.
The one thing that is good about what's happening in our community, I say it's good, but it's like a perfect storm for us in terms of our ability to respond. I mean, I think we have the housing initiative. We've got community responders. We've got community paramedics. And as Councilmember Smith said, our goal now is how do we connect the dots? How do we complement, support each one of these initiatives? And, should we be all going left or right, or some go left and others go right? So it's the right time. Maybe I shouldn't say it's something good is happening. It is the right time for us to bring all of these, a confluence of initiatives together. And we are so fortunate. I just don't think, and I hope you all realize the amount of collaboration between the city and the county. And nobody is asking for all the credit, or we're just out trying to do our jobs, and make this a better community. That's the space we're in and should be. But I think it's really, really a special time to be in this community with the type of collaboration and support that we have right now.
And I'm just hoping that another dot that's being connected, and possibly not in a pilot phase of it, but I'm hoping that we figure out how our non-traditional responders play a part, like our community health workers and the peer support workers, because these are community-based, but they're being educated and built up in crisis response. And a lot of the training that your pilot staff will receive, they already have that information. So just trying to figure out, once we stabilize our response, how do we on-ramp community workers who are interested in serving these communities as well? So that our essential services aren't distressed because we are attending to mental health issues and quality of life issues that other members of our community can respond to and help members of community recover from.
Well, we certainly know that it's going to take a village, and we're going to need all the help that we can get to support our community.
So nice. You know, my last thought of just hearing the depth, and we're just on the doorstep of this initiative. We're on the doorstep of the downtown public safety. Like, I don't want to jinx us, but I feel like we might in the future look back at early 2023 and said, hey, this is a turning point. Something really started to change. Now we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of things that are out of our hands in the universe that make these systems hard to change and support. But I feel really positive that we're putting in really meaningful effort, and there's a long work ahead. So any other thoughts, Councilwomen, or questions?
I'm looking at the timing of everything. All of these reports and plans and pilot programs, you know, if we really start to look at how things have its connection and how they're going together, I think we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, me too. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Good luck getting out there.
Thank you.
Send our best to everybody. The 5 folks who have signed up for the program. We'll see them downtown.
Thanks. See you.
Yeah. All right. Moving along, we have 2 more items. And the next one I'm going to share a little bit. Item number 6 on our agenda is an update from the Buncombe County Energy and Environment Subcommittee. I mentioned earlier, I serve alongside county commissioners on their committee similar to this. And there's just some interesting stuff bubbling along that doesn't require us to make any decisions, and isn't a done deal by any chance, but could really help us provide a keystone piece of a puzzle we've been missing for quite some time. I just wanted to share so we're all abreast of it. So thank you for helping me with the slides, Katie. If you go on to the next slide. So I followed Deborah's beautiful presentation. Here's a summary. There's no action being requested of the city, but the purpose is to keep council informed because we are partners in the Blue Horizons project, which helps us reach our 100% renewable energy goal, and we share that policy with the county. And then the potential project is there's an opportunity for the county and Asheville residents to benefit from a first in the state pilot program to receive low interest loans for clean energy projects on low and moderate income residents. So think financing for solar, or if you need to get a new heating system, you might be able to get this really great rate on a loan so that you can improve your residence while saving energy at the same time. If you go on to the next slide. So the policy context, this just kind of lays out all those intersecting places. We have policy direction from our city around our climate justice initiative, our municipal climate action plan, this 100% renewable energy policy that we've partnered on with the city to get really every residence and every business towards renewable energy, and also our climate resilience assessment. Next slide, please. And to narrow it from the list I just shared, there's several things that we need to work towards to a more sustainable community. One place is really figuring out how we can support our residents in having cleaner and cleaner energy. And so common methods people talk about is energy efficiency, making sure, you're turning out the lights when you can, or that you are using efficient appliances, solar energy, electric vehicles, weatherization. We have some fantastic weatherization programs where volunteers will come in and put insulation in your roof so that you're keeping your heat in the winter, et cetera. And there's also a lot of common barriers. One is just, this isn't a priority for everybody. Call a spade a spade. There's a lot of people in our community who really are motivated, a lot of low hanging fruit towards these goals of people who want this, but it's not everybody's top priority. There's also a lot of people that are unaware of the options, whether it's they're unaware of Duke Energy rebates or rebates coming down from the federal government. There's just people who just might not make these choices. And then I underline and bolded this upfront cost because the potential project I'm going to share is really trying to address this upfront cost barrier. And then of course, another barrier is if you're renting, your landlord makes the decision. So there's plenty of our neighbors who don't own their home. So some steps towards clean energy are really they're not in charge of making that decision. The next slide really helps us look at what this opportunity is. So the Inflation Reduction Act, as we all know from the federal government, has a program within it called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And the federal government, through Biden's administration, has identified that, like I said earlier, access to financing is a keystone. It's a major, major problem to move towards making investments in more energy smart things. And so through the IRA, they've created this $27 billion loan program through what they're calling the Green Bank program. And so it's a program where green banks and community development finance institutions partner together to offer really attractive rates or competitive loans or loans that can go out to people who traditionally do not get access to financing through traditional banks. And we live in a state where we are very lucky that a green bank, the North Carolina Clean Energy Fund, has been formed. So in order to get access to any of this federal dollar, your state needs to have a green bank already up and running. And so you can see the beautiful picture there. This is our Clean Energy Fund. It's run by Melissa and Jen. Melissa worked at Self-Help Credit Union for nearly 15 years, so she's really from the lending side. Our very own Bridget Herring is on the board of this Clean Energy Fund and has exerted tremendous state leadership for our community in anticipating this need. It's a 501c3, and they are the entity that would pursue getting the federal dollars to then work with a CDFI to lend this money out. So lots of technical, wait a minute, how does this work that we could get into if you have questions? But the bottom line is you need one of these nonprofits in your state to get access to this federal money. And then that nonprofit will be the anchor partner that pulls together the CDFI who actually writes the loan, who pulls together a community partner who works with the HVAC installers to get them to actually sell the energy efficient products. It pulls together the community partner who might run a campaign, like we've run Solarize campaigns. So this is very much a deal that structures bringing a lot of people together. And the Clean Energy Fund will be that hub. So we're super lucky we have this. If you go on to the next slide, the pilot opportunity, the Green Bank just came to the county. At the county's meeting this past Friday, we voted to encourage the full commission to step into this pilot. We'll see if they do that in their budget talks this spring. But what they're looking for is if the county could provide what's called a loan loss reserve of $100,000. So the county is being asked to put in this money, and with a loan loss reserve, they can then go to the CDFI and say, give me your best rates possible. I know you're nervous. If you don't get your money back, you're going to lose your money. We have a reserve. So if you give us the cheapest rate possible, and if you lend to people with super low FICO scores, I know as a bank you're nervous, but if they default, we'll pay you back with this loan loss reserve. So it's a model we see in clean energy circles a lot.
So it kind of sounds like it is a secured loan if the county is going to be the backup, or no?
Each individual loan ends up being unsecured. So each loan doesn't get secured through the loan loss reserve. It's more that the fundamental loan deal is just really competitive. And if those defaults happen for individual residents at a time, the county's money is the backup. So instead of the county backing up one loan at a time, there's a piggy bank for the entire loan fund. And then on the slide, showing that that the target of this federal program is that it's for residential, that it's unsecured, they're low interest, it's available to folks regardless of FICO score, easy application, really big ranging loan amount, et cetera. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the key is that just because you have a loan product doesn't mean people get it. People make decisions about their heating or cooling when they're talking to MB Haynes, and making sure that the installer community and contractor community sees, hey, when I'm talking to a client that's interested, I could share, hey, here's a financing product, et cetera. Yeah, Vice Mayor Kilgore.
Okay, yeah, I was looking into this program, like you were saying, basically, so Buncombe County actually sort of said as a security in some way for these people with lower income. And but this is what I'm concerned about. Does this program reduce the cost of some of the products? Like you're looking at the hot water heat and the heat pump, but I found out a lot of green products cost more. So, then we're looking at that. They may be able to get these loans, but they're paying a lot more for the product if they just went and bought a regular hot water tank. So will they actually subsidize some of the cost of these green energy products, which are more expensive for the client?
Great question. Yeah, because if you get kind of a high energy using appliance, which is kind of a business as usual traditional product, there is sometimes often a surplus or it's more expensive. The loans themselves would not reduce the cost of the product. And other big parts of the IRA have substantial upfront rebates so that the fundamental cost on the shelf is reduced depending on the product, or there's after the fact rebates, and Duke Energy provides cost reduction benefits. And so what we're seeing is these loans could really help bring together a bunch of other puzzle pieces to reduce the cost of the product. But what's tricky is that, we got a heat pump in our house. That's the electric energy efficient one. I had to do so much dang work, and I care about this stuff. Yeah. It's a lot of work for citizens to get that rebate to play in the Duke program. And so through a program like this, if we had a community partner like Blue Horizons who does that unified outreach, so provides that training.
So Blue Horizon is going to actually assist the people in getting these rebates back and things like that. So
it's easier. So it's not 100% certain that Blue Horizons would be that community partner. The city and county will put out an RFP this fall for our Blue Horizons partner. And depending on what nonprofit delivers this. So yes, I guess the shorter answer is Blue Horizons would be the critical community outreach, installer, trainer, one-stop shop to make citizens have just an easier path to navigate all these ways to bring the cost down so that they could say yes to this type of stuff. And we have experience with that model in what's called the Solarize program. So we did a Solarize program where Blue Horizons did a campaign to get a bunch of community members to sign up to all get solar. They did a bulk purchase, which reduced the price of the solar. They had an installer who offered financing that isn't as good as this financing will be, and 180 residents installed solar. And so Blue Horizons was out on the street being that navigator through all of this way to make the finances cheaper. And so we would anticipate that Blue Horizons would be our community partner for that as well.
Okay, and I noticed that one of the notes on a previous slide basically said something about 1 to 2 communities would be selected. I just wondered what would that process look like?
Since the North Carolina Clean Energy Fund, since they're a nonprofit, they're seeing all this federal money coming in mid-2024. So they want to pilot with 1 or 2 communities to work out a lot of kinks in how this would work. And as far as how it would work, if they receive a commitment from a county or city to do this loan loss reserve, that is the decision-making mechanism. And so they aren't pursuing the city of Asheville, but
So they're not pursuing the city of Asheville.
No, ma'am. So our residents would benefit, but at this point, the county is considering paying into that loan loss reserve, Buncombe County. And so if our colleagues on the county commission support this, this would come to our community. And again, though, I just want to share because our residents would benefit from it. And we're partners in the Blue Horizons project, even if we aren't being asked to financially contribute to the loan loss reserve. Yeah. Next slide. Let's see what else. That might have been the bulk of the summary. Yep, there you go. So it's just kind of saying there's no action of us, but we're committed partners to both Blue Horizons and this 100% renewable energy goal. And so I just wanted everybody to be abreast of this possibility. It might not come together, but hopefully it does. And so this could be a really great opportunity for us to see more and more folks being able to make a choice to do some improvements. The last thing I'll share too is that we know that there's a lot of people who are interested in making improvements like this, but sometimes, you know, if you want to get solar, your roof needs to get fixed first. And so these type of loans would have up to 25% of the loan available for other related home improvements. So that, you know, say you need to get a new hot water heater, but the floor underneath of it's rotted out. Well, sometimes many loans would not help you do other ancillary projects. So this would also allow you to do some other improvements necessary in order to pursue the energy improvements.
And that's good to know because a lot of the homes, basically the electrical panels and things have to be updated before they can even accommodate.
Great point.
Yeah.
That's right. And so then you're up more cash and it's like,
Exactly.
the deal just doesn't happen. You just can't do it. And so the federal government, this is a flagship of the IRA to really get to a major barrier that most Americans have of they might want to do something, but it's just really expensive to work on your home. And so I think it could be really valuable. So hopefully this will come together and happy to take any other questions. Otherwise, it's really just FYI.
That's fine. Thanks.
Here's my question. I see a potential threat to renters. Because anytime there's an improvement made to a home, it could potentially raise the value of the home, therefore increasing the rent. Have you all given that type of consideration and analysis? So it can be more equitable when we do, if we do launch this program.
Yeah, I haven't been part of conversations with that thread. What have you learned that would help with that?
I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Yeah.
You know, if the landlords are in full control and they add these amenities to their unit or home, subsequently, the rents can be raised.
Yeah. And
does it balance out? Is there a cost saving analysis because of these amenities being added? Maybe the electric bill is lower. Like, do we have that? Do we have that purview?
I'll say certainly that many times a big part of the math is the amount of energy you're going to save. So for example, when we invest, this is different, but when we invested in LED streetlights, that was 100% paid for with the energy savings to the tune of, we saved $1 million a year on that. Now that's a city and that's one light source. But I think the math in, let me know what your current heat bill is. Let me know what your current, all of this is very much front and center with the sales folks who are sitting down with individual decision makers saying, let me look at what you pay now. This is how long it would take you to pay off. So that is fundamentally part of the decisions. Now the question is, depending on what you need to do, is it 3 years? Is it 50 years? We're seeing the time to pay it off is lower and lower and lower. But I think your fundamental point is right. There is a threat whenever folks are improving their home, if they aren't the occupant, that it could have impacts on folks.
And that's the reason, that was what I was going to get to, is this program basically, just wondering if it sort of would more or less cater to residential homeowners as opposed to, because once you get into that landlord rental, then you may get into the commercial aspect of it. And I would hate to see funds used for residential improvements to sort of spill over to being used for that type of thing. So I was just wondering if there's some kind of safeguard. It's like Shanika was saying.
That's a great point.
Yeah, to make sure that it does go to residential homeowners and not commercial.
I'm just taking some notes. I know that because there's like lots of fine print and there's a lot to be figured out yet, you know, and part of this, like we just heard our division chief, Jeremy, saying it's iterative. The first step is to get the loan loss reserve before you can even talk to a bank to say, would you capitalize this? And the dollar mark they're looking at is $100,000 loan loss reserve for $1 million of lending. And then you got to talk with your lending partner. Well, what rate are you going to offer? What admin fees could you cut, et cetera? Then what's the technical? So there's lots of, it's very partnership based, but I think these are perfect questions. So like, well, what are we going to do to make sure? And I know one of the fine prints is that the federal government says it would be for 1 to 4 unit residents. So they're not trying to capitalize projects that are for big multi-story, because that's, you're getting into well over a $50,000 loan.
I wasn't concerned about the multi. I'm concerned about the
tenants.
Large. You see, right now, a lot of the landlords here are basically even though they have single family homes and single units, they're still commercial landlords. So that was what I was getting to, not the large buildings, but all single ownership properties that are commercially owned. Or when you say commercially owned, they, you know, it's not.
It's a business. It's an LLC.
Exactly.
So I'll bring this back to the team to kind of think about as things, if this moves forward, what the structure is. It does make me think if it's that could be a way to ensure, to hedge against the risk that you're seeing, Shanika.
To get to the people that need it, because that's what happens with a lot of these products. They end up not getting to the people that need it, and they get to the people. And
we don't want to leave renters out. We want renters to have comfortable homes that are heated well, that are insulated well. But there's
but like Shanika,
you can never expect one product to get to every resident.
Like you said, Shanika said, if you do all that, it's better for the renter. They got to raise them. I mean, you know, you can't keep them from.
Well, I feel like, you know, again, I wanted to provide this as an update just to keep it moving forward, but also we're a partner in this. And so just wanted to make sure that I wasn't being kind of a lone teammate from our city council, but I don't feel like I'm hearing any red flag, big concerns, lots of very thoughtful questions of devil will be in the details. So if this moves forward and you want to keep getting updates, if there's an important junction, maybe however this works, I can just keep keeping people up to speed on it.
For sure. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. Any other thoughts on this topic? Great. All right. Rounding out our agenda to our final item, number 7, closing with public comment. Katie, do we have any public comment at the end of the hour or the end of the meeting?
Checking right now.
Thanks.
No, we do not.
Okay. All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to.
Oh, you're on mute, but I saw it said I second.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay. She said aye. Okay.
Aye all around.
Okay.
We will adjourn. All right. Thanks for a lively conversation, everybody. Great work.